A man gently holds Lady Lobelia's hands, his thumbs grazing her skin. He expresses his deep honor at finally meeting her. Lobelia stands gracefully before the man in a grand, sunlit hall, offering a soft apology. She explains that her stepsister strictly forbade her from speaking with gentlemen. Looking up with tearful, pleading eyes, Lobelia softly calls out Lord Tobias's name. The man earnestly vows to protect her, asking if the terrible rumors were true. A mysterious woman with vibrant hair smirks wickedly in the shadows. She steps forward, interrupting the touching moment with a sharp, sarcastic apology. Amaryllis reveals herself, fanning her face with a confident, haughty smile. She dramatically calls out Lobelia's name, demanding to know what she is doing in such a place. Lobelia gasps in pure terror, shrinking back from the sudden intrusion. Lord Tobias stares at the imposing woman in sheer, panicked disbelief. Amaryllis snaps her elegant fan shut with a sharp, echoing click. She scoffs quietly, analyzing the pathetic display before her. Amaryllis aggressively presses her closed fan against Lord Tobias's chest, invading his space. She flashes a wicked grin and confirms his identity as the Viscount Ellen family's son. Flustered and visibly blushing, Tobias stammers, demanding to know what she wants. Amaryllis coldly orders him to step away from Lobelia, declaring herself as his true opponent. Tobias bravely throws a protective arm in front of the trembling Lobelia. He furiously accuses Amaryllis of tormenting the girl and deliberately hindering her chances of marriage. Amaryllis merely hides her arrogant smirk behind her open fan. She effortlessly flips the accusation, claiming she heard Lobelia is the one secretly seducing aristocratic sons. Tobias shouts in outrage, demanding to know what venom she just spat. Amaryllis coldly dismisses him, stating that Lobelia would never want to deal with a lower-ranked noble anyway. Ignoring the nobleman's sputtering fury, Amaryllis forcefully grabs Lobelia's wrist. She silently demands her sister's compliance. Amaryllis ruthlessly drags Lobelia out of the room, leaving Tobias completely stunned. She throws a careless apology over her shoulder, commanding that they be excused. A fragile teacup shatters violently against the floor, sending porcelain flying. The loud crash echoes sharply through the tense, quiet room. Amaryllis stands tall and furious, glaring down at the cowering Lobelia. She screams at her sister, demanding to know if society will now think she is actively avoiding lower-ranked nobles. Amaryllis frowns, her harsh expression softening into one of bitter, silent frustration. She reflects that their father was the one who ordered this isolation, and she only acted the villain to protect Lobelia's reputation. Turning her back, Amaryllis firmly commands Lobelia to stay away from her target today, Lord Fritz. Lobelia meekly agrees as Amaryllis marches out the heavy wooden doors. Walking alone down the corridor, Amaryllis adjusts her elegant, dark-colored gown. She mutters in relief, thankful she chose to wear a dark dress for this specific occasion. She tightly grips the fabric of her skirt, her focused thoughts drifting to Fritz McCreek. She reasons that since he belongs to a powerful ducal family, her strict uncle should not punish her. She spots Lobelia secretly meeting with another man and immediately realizes the danger. Amaryllis watches from afar, eyes narrowing as she deduces the girl might turn the tables on them. Lobelia passionately embraces the wealthy Lord Fritz in a hidden, sunlit garden. Amaryllis observes the blatant betrayal, wondering if Lobelia has already discarded Lord Darren, her actual fiancé. Fritz gently cups Lobelia's cheek, smiling warmly into her eyes. He happily declares his desire to monopolize her, completely charmed by her innocent facade. Lobelia leans into his touch, pretending to worry about her cruel stepsister's reaction. Fritz confidently assures her that Amaryllis cannot possibly complain against his immense status. Amaryllis watches the sickeningly sweet scene, bitterly acknowledging Lobelia's brilliant societal performance. Society universally views Lobelia as the tragic, brave Marquis's daughter who was taken in and tormented by her evil cousin. In stark contrast, Amaryllis knows she is painted as the lewd, problematic villainess of the family. High society firmly believes she ruins Lobelia's life while shamelessly chasing men herself. Standing quietly in the shadows, Amaryllis lowers her gaze and reflects on the harsh truth. She realizes that everyone only accepts the reality that is most convenient for their own narratives. White flowers bloom gracefully against a dark, fading background. Amaryllis laments that no one will ever know the real truth of their twisted dynamic. A grim flashback begins 8 years ago at the Grand Cleberry house. Young Amaryllis and her older brothers stand in sheer shock before a stern man wielding a riding crop. Uncle Edric coldly declares himself the new, absolute head of the Cleberry family. He grips his leather crop tightly, asserting his terrifying dominance over the orphans. Amaryllis's eldest brother protectively shields his siblings, realizing their uncle has seized control. Their twin brother, at only 14, was deemed too young to inherit the family headship. Edric glares down at the trembling children, demanding their absolute, unquestioning obedience. Thus, Uncle Edric officially stripped them of their legacy and claimed the Cleberry family for himself. The eldest brother bows his head in absolute defeat. He meekly accepts his uncle's tyrannical command, knowing they have no power to fight back. A single, wide eye stares ahead in pure, unadulterated terror. The horrific reality of their new, abusive life suddenly sets in. Edric viciously strikes Ewan across the face with his riding crop. The young boy is violently thrown backward from the brutal, unprovoked impact. Edric sneers in rage, furious that only one of the children answered him. Amaryllis screams out for her brother in absolute, helpless panic. Edric tightly grips the leather crop, swiftly pulling it back for another punishing strike. The sharp weapon cuts dangerously through the tense air. Teo desperately lunges forward, shielding little Rillis with his own body. He begs his uncle to hit him instead of hurting his innocent little sister. Edric swings the crop with ruthless, unforgiving force, violently silencing the young boy. Blood splatters across the room as Teo bravely takes the devastating blow. Teo collapses heavily into his sibling's arms as Amaryllis cries out his name in horror. The narration reveals Uncle Edric harbored a deep, toxic inferiority complex toward their late, highly talented father. Edric turns his back on the bleeding children and calmly walks out the door. He coldly warns them never to defy his authority in the future. Teo holds the side of his bleeding head, casually noting that his eardrum has burst. Ewan and Amaryllis stare at him in sheer, heart-wrenching horror. Kneeling on the cold floor, Teo comforts a violently sobbing Rillis, smiling as he assures her he still has one good ear. Amaryllis cries endlessly, devastated by her brother's permanent, unjust injury. The brothers gently hold Amaryllis's small, trembling hands in theirs. They promise to always be there for her, sealing their tragic bond. A loyal servant solemnly apologizes to the children, explaining they can no longer offer them any help. From that day on, Edric cruelly ordered the entire staff to treat the siblings with absolute coldness. Heavy rain pours relentlessly over the dark, towering grand estate. Amaryllis learns the horrifying, life-shattering news that her beloved brothers are being sent away for adoption. Young Amaryllis tearfully begs her uncle through the heavy doors, refusing to accept the separation. Edric coldly replies that they only need his son, Emilio, living in this house. Edric sits menacingly behind his dark wooden desk, deliberately steepling his fingers. He stares down at the little girl, asserting his absolute, unchallenged authority over her fate. Amaryllis tightly grips her skirt, trembling in a mix of silent fury and crushing despair. Edric sadistically reminds her that she is only kept alive out of mercy and must never forget it. A heavy, leather-bound ledger slams violently onto the desk with a loud, intimidating thud. Edric's imposing shadow looms over the terrified young girl. Little Amaryllis stares at the massive book in complete, helpless shock. Edric cruelly commands the child to take over the estate's complex bookkeeping from now on. Edric grabs Amaryllis by the fragile shoulders, pulling her close with a terrifying, unblinking glare. He warns her she is only allowed to use the room after he has gone to sleep, ensuring she remains an invisible slave. Young Amaryllis stands with her head bowed, her small frame trembling under the weight of her cruel new reality. She quietly acknowledges her lost parents and brothers, murmuring that she understands her place. Tears stream relentlessly down Amaryllis's face as she aggressively rubs her eyes in quiet devastation. She reflects on the harsh, terrifying truth that everyone she loves has vanished from her side. Shrouded in complete darkness, her bowed head hints at a deep, simmering resolve taking root. She realizes that her utter isolation leaves her with only one viable path forward. Young Amaryllis lifts her tear-stained face, her wide eyes suddenly burning with fierce, unyielding determination. Stripped of her protectors, she vows that she has absolutely no choice but to become strong. A violent slap echoes sharply as a delicate arrangement of lily flowers is aggressively struck. An angry voice shrieks through the room, demanding to know why such inappropriate flowers were prepared. Amaryllis bows her head submissively as her infuriated aunt screams directly into her face. The older woman brutally berates her for throwing the tea party into an uproar, completely ignoring Amaryllis's quiet apology. Amaryllis turns her gaze away, her expression hardening with bitter, silent frustration. She internally curses the unfair situation, knowing she could never have predicted a walk-in guest with a severe lily allergy. A young nobleman firmly orders Amaryllis to quickly change the mansion's floral arrangements to appease the furious woman. Amaryllis sighs internally, recognizing the usual hysteria and deciding that simple obedience is the fastest way to survive the ordeal. Amaryllis walks briskly through the decorated halls, desperately needing a quiet moment to cool her stinging cheek. Suddenly, a familiar male voice casually calls out her name from behind. The arrogant speaker's voice drips with condescension as he mentions Lord Emilio and Lady Lobelia. He heavily implies that Amaryllis needs to learn her proper place when dealing with her superiors. The man aggressively grabs Amaryllis's wrist, forcefully halting her in her tracks. He leans in closer, arrogantly suggesting that her miserable life could slightly improve if she just surrendered to him. The blonde nobleman sneers down at Amaryllis, viciously mocking her for losing her fiancé to Lobelia. He brutally taunts her pathetic existence, pointing out that she works like a lowly servant and sleeps in a mere storage room. Amaryllis stares back with icy, unwavering composure, refusing to let the cruel words break her spirit. She silently reflects on the twisted reality that Lord Darren is actually supposed to be her rightful fiancé. The nobleman suddenly freezes, a nervous sweat breaking out across his pale, panicked face. His arrogant smirk completely vanishes as he realizes his intimidation tactics are failing. Amaryllis fiercely shoves the stunned man away, her eyes burning with terrifying, icy disdain. She firmly declares that Lord Darren only has eyes for her, warning the pathetic noble that a ducal house is entirely unsuitable for him. Lobelia suddenly gasps, feigning innocent shock at Amaryllis's harsh and aggressive behavior. She sweetly questions if it is truly appropriate for Amaryllis to act so friendly with Lord Fritz after their recent evening party encounter. Amaryllis furiously points a finger at her cousin, loudly accusing Lobelia of just playing around with Lord Fritz for fun. She fiercely defends her own reputation, screaming that her true love has always been Lord Darren. The blonde nobleman and Lobelia flinch violently as Amaryllis threatens to report their behavior to the powerful Duke of Bachmann. Thoroughly intimidated, the man hastily apologizes for his rudeness and backs down completely. The elegant Duchess of Bachmann steps into view in Amaryllis's mind, her strict, unyielding gaze commanding instant respect. Amaryllis glares at her terrified tormentors, weaponizing the Duchess's notoriously severe reputation against them. Amaryllis turns on her heel and storms away, loudly boasting that the powerful Duchess will soon be her mother-in-law anyway. Lobelia seethes in the background, clicking her tongue and muttering that Amaryllis shouldn't get so carried away just because she backed down. Once safely out of sight, Amaryllis closes her eyes and lets out a heavy, exhausted sigh. Her tough, villainous facade crumbles slightly as the sheer weight of her daily performance takes its toll. She quietly arranges a fresh vase of beautiful flowers, her lonely thoughts drifting to her long-lost brothers. She wonders sadly if their 8 years of total silence means they are too busy or simply too happy to remember her. Staring out the sunlit window, Amaryllis accepts the bitter, unchangeable reality of her total isolation. She whispers to herself that her brothers are never coming back, resolving to face her massive burdens alone. A heavy ledger bursts open in her mind, gold coins scattering wildly into the dark void. She grimly notes that Uncle Edric's wasteful spending is rapidly driving the entire Clebury territory into total financial ruin. She presses a trembling hand against the glass, her heart aching for the warm memories of the past. She admits how desperately she wanted to protect the Clebury house because it was the only place she ever lived with her true family. Shadows creep across a blooming rose as her expression hardens into cold, unbreakable resolve. She realizes that the time for passive suffering and endless endurance has finally come to an end. Amaryllis narrows her eyes, a dangerous, highly calculating light filling her focused gaze. With her mind firmly made up, she knows there is only one drastic course of action left to take. 2 months pass, bringing the glittering, high-stakes environment of a grand royal family party. Amaryllis steps into the massive ballroom, instantly drawing the murmuring, judgmental attention of the aristocratic crowd. She watches the elegantly dressed aristocrats mingling under the bright, magnificent chandeliers. She coldly analyzes the gathering, knowing they are all just probing each other's hidden intentions behind fake, polite smiles. The swirling miasma of deception, jealousy, and pride threatens to make her physically sick. Amaryllis observes the loud laughter and ulterior motives, easily reading the toxic truths hidden on every noble's face. A sharp, furious shout suddenly cuts through the polite, low hum of the ballroom chatter. Someone screams Amaryllis's name with unmistakable, unbridled venom. Lord Darren marches forward, fiercely pointing an accusing finger at Amaryllis while dramatically shielding Lobelia. He publicly declares an immediate end to their engagement, announcing he will marry Lobelia instead to escape such a wicked villainess. Amaryllis stares back with utter, chilling indifference, silently mocking Darren's pathetic dramatic performance. She notes that the public humiliation happened a bit earlier than she expected, but it aligns perfectly with her grand scheme. A dark, highly satisfied smirk slowly spreads across Amaryllis's elegant, composed face. She whispers to herself that the timing of this theatrical betrayal is absolutely perfect. Amaryllis calmly accepts the broken engagement, bowing slightly before gracefully turning to leave the stunned party. Lord Darren flinches in sheer disbelief, completely derailed by her total lack of tears or furious anger. Outraged by her absolute indifference, Darren screams, demanding to know if she has anything else to say for herself. Amaryllis merely glances over her shoulder, coolly asking if there is really anything left to discuss. Darren clenches his trembling fists, his face red with unadulterated, self-righteous fury. He violently threatens to expose all of her vile misdeeds to high society and ensure she is severely punished. Darren loudly lists her supposed crimes, accusing her of abusing servants and treating Lobelia like a personal maid. He publicly shames her for tearing her cousin's dresses, stealing her precious ornaments, and shamelessly seducing other noblemen. Amaryllis listens to the laundry list of scandalous accusations without blinking a single eye. She internally acknowledges that Lobelia and her enablers have done a truly brilliant job spreading these vicious, fabricated rumors. She spots her Uncle Edric sweating nervously in the crowd, confirming her suspicion that her family orchestrated this public execution. She realizes they must crush her completely right now to prevent the strict Duchess from ever intervening on her behalf. Amaryllis cuts through Darren's unhinged rant, her voice echoing with chilling, absolute authority. She calmly states she has no objection to the annulment, but points out that his pathetic attempt at punishment is far too late. Lord Darren's self-righteous fury instantly shatters into nervous, sputtering confusion. He completely freezes, thrown off balance by her terrifying lack of fear and submission. Amaryllis flashes a wickedly seductive smile, asking why she should be blamed if he was so easily seduced by her mere sister-in-law. She casually mocks his weak character, deciding it might be highly entertaining to completely ruin his big moment. She dismisses his grand accusations with a flippant wave of her hand, suggesting he is simply acting out before tying the knot. Her sharp, highly condescending tone completely emasculates the furious nobleman in front of the entire court. Amaryllis smoothly spins the narrative, brazenly claiming that making Lobelia work was merely strict, necessary discipline. She casually adds that her uncle's constant, outdated nagging made the Cleberry estate incredibly suffocating anyway. Both Darren and Uncle Edric stare in wide-eyed, sputtering horror as she shamelessly owns the villainous persona. Amaryllis coldly reminds Darren that he doesn't need to shout, as everyone in high society already knows these pathetic rumors. Leaning in uncomfortably close, Amaryllis aggressively presses a slender finger to Darren's trembling lips. She mocks the couple as a perfectly dull pair, giving them her highly sarcastic blessing to just get engaged already. Without waiting for a response, Amaryllis gracefully turns her back on the utterly humiliated Darren. She bids the silent ballroom a good day, declaring she is simply too tired to entertain their circus any longer. The entire ballroom erupts into chaotic whispers, the nobles completely scandalized by Amaryllis's brazen, unapologetic exit. Flustered aristocrats desperately demand answers from a deeply embarrassed, panicking Marquis Cleberry. Back in the quiet safety of her dark room, Amaryllis begins swiftly packing her dresses into a travel bag. She wonders if her spectacular public display will finally earn her an official removal from the family register or total exile from the country. The loud zip of her leather bag seals her ultimate decision to completely escape her toxic life. She mutters that she must flee the estate immediately, long before her furious relatives return from the disastrous party. The heavy bedroom door suddenly creaks open, revealing a highly confused maid named Sandra. Amaryllis freezes in sheer panic as the servant questions why she is packing instead of attending the royal evening party. Staring at the packed luggage, Sandra expresses deep relief that she could at least see Amaryllis's face one last time. Smiling softly, Amaryllis gently asks the loyal maid if she can gather Kevin so they can listen to her final request together. Approaching a nearby door, Sandra knocks gently and calls out to Kevin, asking if he has a moment to spare. The older steward, Kevin, stands up from his desk in surprise, questioning if Lady Amaryllis has already returned from the grand party. Stepping into the room with a warm, apologetic smile, Amaryllis apologizes for interrupting their busy schedules. A heartwarming memory reveals Kevin, Sandra, and the kitchen staff secretly throwing a birthday celebration for a beaming Amaryllis. She reflects that in this hellish estate, the loyal servants were her only true support system, secretly covering her work and ensuring she was fed behind her uncle's back. Kevin's expression darkens with somber realization as he pieces the sudden visit together. He quietly acknowledges that she is finally leaving the estate. Tears welling in her eyes, Amaryllis maintains a brave smile and confirms that Lord Darren publicly broke off their engagement. She explains that without that political shield, she can no longer safely stay in the oppressive mansion. Gently dropping a small metal key into Kevin's hand, Amaryllis explains it belongs to the library she used for her constant estate work. She sincerely asks him to pass on her deepest to the rest of the staff for everything they have done. Her expression turning deadly serious, Amaryllis firmly warns Kevin that he must not let himself go down with her uncle's sinking ship. She predicts the Cleberry market will inevitably collapse and urges the steward to retire the moment he spots the warning signs. Amaryllis slides a thick, heavy envelope of crucial documents toward the steward as Sandra breaks down into silent tears. She urgently requests that Kevin deliver the hidden evidence directly to the official trustee. Kevin examines the envelope with a heavy, resolute gaze, promising to observe the situation carefully and execute her orders. He notes that if the territory's management rights are legally transferred to the country, the innocent citizens will finally be saved from ruin. Wiping away her tears, Sandra steps forward and suddenly presents a small pouch to the surprised noblewoman. The heavy pouch jingles as it opens, revealing a stash of shining gold coins. Amaryllis gasps in sheer astonishment at the unexpected offering. Flustered and overwhelmed, Amaryllis tries to refuse the heavy purse, insisting she cannot accept such a massive sum without giving anything in return. Sandra smiles warmly through her tears, begging her to take the funds to ensure a safe journey to the neighboring country. The bespectacled maid winks playfully, her cheerful smile cutting through the heavy atmosphere. She explains that the staff had already pooled the money to fund Amaryllis's birthday party next month anyway. Amaryllis bites her lip as fresh tears stream down her face, deeply moved by their unwavering devotion. Sandra softly laments that they cannot celebrate properly this year, earnestly praying for her young lady to finally find happiness. Overwhelmed by their kindness, Amaryllis throws her arms around both Kevin and Sandra in a fierce, emotional embrace. She whispers her deepest thanks, fiercely vowing that she will never forget their life-saving generosity. The towering walls of the oppressive Cleberry estate loom under a shifting, dramatic sky. The narration solidifies her unbreakable vow to survive, no matter what challenges lie ahead. Checking a delicate pocket watch, Amaryllis notes the time is exactly 4 o'clock. Meaning she can still catch the final shared carriage out of town. She resolves that before she can search for her missing brothers, she must first successfully establish her own independent life. Standing in the bustling streets, she admits it would have been ideal if Kevin could have introduced her to a safe workplace. Armed only with strict noble etiquette and rigorous bookkeeping skills, she wonders if surviving as an independent merchant is truly a realistic goal. She firmly grips the wooden carriage handle, her mind rapidly assessing her viable options. She rationalizes that her solid calculation skills should be enough to secure a position at a local trading company. Suddenly, a tall, imposing man steps forward and firmly grabs her arm, halting her escape. He stares her down with sharp eyes, sternly identifying her as Lady Amaryllis of the Cleberry market. Amaryllis completely freezes, her single visible eye widening in sheer, unadulterated panic. Taking in his distinct uniform, she instantly recognizes her captor as an elite royal purple knight. Stuttering nervously, she confirms her identity and asks how she can assist the formidable royal guard. Internally, she spirals into total panic, terrified that her brazen, villainous display at the party had provoked the royal family's wrath. The tall knight does not draw a weapon, but his imposing stance leaves no room for argument. He formally requests that she accompany him to the palace immediately, exactly as she is. The grand, spired architecture of the royal palace looms heavily against the sky, exuding absolute authority. Dragged into the center of power, Amaryllis desperately prays that her impending judgment will end as peacefully as possible. Amaryllis sits rigidly on a plush, luxurious sofa inside a magnificent royal study, her heart hammering violently against her ribs. An unseen attendant politely instructs her to wait, leaving her alone with her escalating dread. Dripping in cold sweat, Amaryllis's mind races as she envisions the absolute worst-case scenarios. She mentally begs the king not to execute her for playing the villainess, frantically promising that she was already planning to flee the country and take full responsibility. The tense, suffocating silence of the grand study is suddenly shattered. The heavy, ornate double doors emit a sharp click before swinging wide open. Two incredibly powerful figures stride into the room, their royal presence instantly dominating the space. The majestic, bearded king apologizes for the delay, standing proudly alongside his handsome son, Crown Prince Lucian. Driven by pure instinct and rigorous etiquette, Amaryllis instantly drops into a deep, flawless curtsy to introduce herself. Behind her polite facade, she is absolutely losing her mind over the fact that both the king and the crown prince have cornered her. The king casually waves off her stiff formalities, generously instructing the terrified noblewoman to take a seat. Trembling internally, Amaryllis obeys, desperately wondering if her mere existence has already offended the ruler. The majestic king settles heavily into the plush armchair across from her, crossing his arms with a serious sigh. He closes his eyes and utters a heavy, ominous transition, signaling the start of her judgment. Amaryllis flinches violently, her wide eyes locking onto the king as she braces for an immediate death sentence. The monarch slowly reveals that both he and Prince Lucian personally witnessed her spectacular, dramatic display at the royal gathering. Assuming she is about to be arrested for high treason, Amaryllis bows her head deeply in absolute shame. She quickly apologizes, deeply regretting that the royal family had to witness such a chaotic, unsightly spectacle. The king completely bypasses her frantic apology, turning his head to address his son instead. Crown Prince Lucian steps forward, flashing a gentle, disarming smile as he awaits his father's command. Amaryllis slowly lifts her head, completely derailed by the surprisingly calm atmosphere. Her single visible eye blinks in sheer, unadulterated confusion. Prince Lucian places a formal hand over his heart, his handsome face practically glowing with absolute sincerity. He looks directly into her eyes and formally requests that the notorious Villainess become his personal educator. Amaryllis's eyes practically bug out of her skull, her entire brain short-circuiting on the spot. The sheer absurdity of the royal request leaves her completely paralyzed in shock. Lucian's earnest, smiling face leans in closer, his royal charm completely untainted by deceit. He reiterates his shocking desire to hire the disgraced Marquis's daughter as his personal tutor. Amaryllis remains frozen on the luxurious sofa, her perfectly crafted villainous persona crumbling into dust. She stares at the prince in utterly dumbfounded silence, unable to process the bizarre turn of events. A massive, trembling pupil reflects her total, system-crashing bewilderment. The terrifying threat of royal execution has instantly morphed into a baffling job interview. Shaking uncontrollably, Amaryllis stammers out a desperate reality check for the smiling prince. She reminds the royals that she is universally despised as a rare villainess, questioning if they have mistaken her for someone else. The bearded king raises a calming hand, apologizing for giving the poor girl such a massive fright. He smoothly clarifies that there is no mistake, revealing he specifically ordered her capture because he desired her unique, villainous expertise. The king proudly praises Lucian as an objectively excellent heir, but heavily sighs as he admits his son's fatal flaw. He explains that the prince is far too honest, making him completely incapable of reading the toxic sarcasm and hidden daggers in aristocratic diplomacy. Amaryllis blinks, her sharp political instincts instantly kicking back in. She bluntly points out that such naive, unchecked honesty is a massive, highly dangerous weakness for a future king to possess. Prince Lucian rubs the back of his neck with an awkward, highly embarrassed smile. He sheepishly admits that his terrible judge of character allowed his former fiancée to secretly cheat on him for 3 entire years before he noticed. Amaryllis mentally screams in disbelief, absolutely flabbergasted that a royal could be so easily duped for 3 whole years. Looking determined, Lucian vows that he wants to learn how to properly unite the scheming nobles without ever being played for a fool again. Prince Lucian points a completely unironic, highly enthusiastic finger directly at the stunned noblewoman. He cheerfully declares that to survive the snake pit, he absolutely must learn the art of black-heartedness from a certified villainess like her. Amaryllis's wide eyes twitch slightly as she processes the prince's incredibly flawed, yet earnest logic. The absolute absurdity of being officially hired to teach a royal how to be evil leaves her speechless. A heavy bead of sweat slides down Amaryllis's cheek as she stares blankly at the smiling royal. She internally questions if she should be flattered by the high-paying job offer, or deeply insulted that the crown prince considers her a master of black-hearted villainy. Prince Lucian gazed at Lady Amaryllis with a sincere expression, earnestly asking her to lend him her strength. Flustered by his unfairly handsome face, Amaryllis felt her mind descend into absolute turmoil. She desperately reminded herself not to be mesmerized by his royal charm. Lowering her gaze respectfully, she apologized and insisted she could not be of use to him. She confessed that her previous wicked behavior was nothing more than pretending to be a villainess. Unfazed by her admission, Lucian simply smiled and confidently replied that he already knew the truth about her facade. Standing together in the quiet library, he pointed out that he could never make such a request if she were truly wicked. Surprised by his unshakable faith in her, Amaryllis could only stare back in mild confusion. Leisurely sipping his tea, Lucian revealed his deep knowledge of her noble lineage as the third child of the former Marquis Clebery. He praised her sharp intellect, noting that she had personally managed her family's bookkeeping and estate. Shock rippled through Amaryllis as he calmly detailed her hidden oppression under her uncle's family and her secret plan to flee to the neighboring country. Hearing this thorough investigation, she internally questioned why the royal family would go to such extreme lengths to look into her past. Pressing the issue, she argued that someone with such immense investigative power surely had no need for her assistance. Gripping his chair, Lucian firmly denied her assumption, clarifying that they did not investigate every single noble in such meticulous detail. Stepping closer, he explained that digging into foreign envoys or high-ranking nobles presented a much greater challenge. He implied that his deep investigation into her life was a unique circumstance necessary to uncover who she truly was. Flashing a bright smile, the prince praised her ruthless ability to read opponents, strike their weak points, and mercilessly cut ties when necessary. Hearing his words, Amaryllis realized with quiet shock that he had completely uncovered the real personality she thought she had hidden from the world. Snapping her out of her daze, Lucian cheerfully called her name and extended an inviting hand toward her. Amaryllis jolted in surprise, overwhelmed by the suddenness of his proposal. Shifting the scene to an audience with the king, the monarch loudly declared that her exceptional skills were exactly why he chose her to be Lucian's educator. Overwhelmed by the heavy responsibility, she attempted to refuse the offer. Locking onto her with a piercing, authoritative stare, the king coldly addressed her by her full name, Amaryllis Clebery. The sheer weight of his imposing presence instantly silenced any further protests. Trembling under the crushing weight of the absolute authority before her, Amaryllis realized she had no choice as the king issued a strict royal order. Beside her terrified form, Lucian beamed with a cheerful, victorious smile. Leaning in with a victorious smirk, Lucian gleefully pointed out that she had nowhere else to go since she could not return to her abusive uncle. Utterly defeated, Amaryllis felt her heart sink as she accepted the grim reality that she could not escape his grasp. Relaxing back into his seat, the king confirmed that invoking a royal order would easily silence any complaints from her former family. He promised to prepare the official documents by tomorrow and formally handed the rest of the responsibility over to the eager prince. Bowing her head in reluctant submission, she formally accepted the royal arrangement. Internally, she tried to comfort herself by acknowledging that at least her cruel uncle and Emilio could no longer torment her inside the palace walls. Collecting her resolve, Amaryllis placed a hand gently against her chest and looked up with renewed determination. She prepared to formally accept her new, unavoidable role. Reaching forward, she firmly grasped the prince's hand to seal their new arrangement. The crisp handshake marked the official beginning of their unusual partnership. Smiling warmly as their hands met, Lucian expressed his genuine excitement to work alongside her from now on. He confidently and officially addressed her by her brand new title as his respected teacher. Taken aback by the sudden shift in dynamics, Amaryllis stared at him with wide, uncertain eyes. She softly murmured his name, still struggling to process the rapid turn of events. Blushing furiously at the formal title, she quickly begged him to stop calling her his teacher. Flustered, she insisted that he drop all honorifics and simply refer to her by her first name. Chuckling lightly at her previous request, Lucian happily agreed to drop the titles. Walking together down the opulent palace hallway, Amaryllis then worriedly asked if it was too risky for others to realize the prince was receiving such dark education. As their footsteps echoed in perfect sync across the polished marble floor, a sudden thought seemed to cross the prince's mind. He paused slightly, interrupting the comfortable silence with a lingering transition. Turning to face her with a dazzling, affectionate smile, Lucian confessed his desire to still show her proper respect. He gently requested permission to keep calling her his teacher whenever they were entirely alone. Caught completely off guard by his smooth request, Amaryllis let out a flat, breathless sigh of disbelief. Realizing she could never win a battle of words against him, she reluctantly agreed to his private terms. Internally screaming at her own weakness, Amaryllis realized she had been totally manipulated by his honest, humble royal charm. As he cheerfully opened the grand doors to her new quarters, she silently branded the smiling prince as an absolutely terrifying person. Stepping into the incredibly luxurious bedroom, Lucian graciously presented her new living arrangements. He casually instructed her to ask any passing knight for directions if she ever managed to get lost in the massive palace. Sweeping her gaze over the extravagant furnishings, Amaryllis asked in sheer disbelief if this massive suite was truly meant for her. Nodding proudly, Lucian assured her that she possessed full permission to alter the lavish interior to her exact tastes. Still overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the room, she anxiously pointed out her original expectations. She confessed that she had only anticipated a modest, standard dormitory assigned for regular palace duty. Smoothly taking her luggage from her hands, the prince acknowledged her completely valid confusion regarding the housing arrangements. He gently noted that the specific location of her room was an important topic he intended to discuss. Standing just outside the grand doorway, a perfectly postured maid bowed deeply to welcome the new guest. The silent display of absolute respect highlighted the immense privilege of Amaryllis's new position. Settling comfortably onto an elegant sofa, Lucian explained the strict political necessity of creating a public excuse for her constant presence. Amaryllis nodded in understanding, fully aware that a high-profile royal could not simply keep an unaffiliated woman by his side without drawing intense scrutiny. Imagining a terrifying swarm of jealous noblewomen, Amaryllis realized that hovering around the unengaged prince would paint a massive target on her back. Dreading the inevitable political trouble, she waited anxiously to hear his grand solution to this dangerous social problem. Dropping an absolute bombshell, Lucian smoothly declared his intention to keep her close by officially naming her as his new fiancée candidate. The sheer audacity of his flawless political cover story left Amaryllis utterly speechless. Forcing her racing mind to process the logic, she reluctantly admitted that a fake courtship was the most untouchable excuse for her presence. However, as she connected the dots regarding her ridiculously lavish bedroom, a new wave of deep suspicion began to bother her. Narrowing her eyes with razor-sharp deduction, Amaryllis recalled the traditional purpose of this specific palace wing. She realized this extravagant suite was strictly reserved for those the royal family intended to publicly flaunt. Staring at the prince's relaxed back, she calculated the terrifying timeline of his actions. She noted with absolute dread that it had only been a mere 4 hours since his previous engagement had been officially annulled. Tapping her chin in deep thought, Amaryllis concluded that these flawless accommodations could never have been arranged on such short notice. She deduced that the cunning prince must have thoroughly investigated her and meticulously prepared this trap long before his previous engagement even ended. Unable to contain her burning curiosity any longer, she boldly stepped forward and demanded the absolute truth. She sharply questioned the prince about exactly how long he had been secretly watching her from the shadows. Caught completely off guard by her razor-sharp intuition, Lucian's eyes widened in genuine, undisguised shock. For a fleeting second, the brilliant prince's perfectly crafted mask cracked under her piercing interrogation. Quickly recovering his composure, Lucian let out a nervous chuckle and showered his new teacher with genuine praise. He marveled at her terrifying ability to unravel his deeply hidden schemes using only the room's lavish furnishings as a clue. Refusing to let him dodge the question with empty flattery, Amaryllis slammed her hand down and demanded he drop the charming act. She pressed him relentlessly to reveal the true timeline of his grand, manipulative scheme. Instead of answering, the prince smoothly closed the distance between them, leaning in until their faces were inches apart. Completely blindsided by his aggressive invasion of her personal space, Amaryllis let out a breathless squeak of confusion. Trapped by his sudden proximity, Amaryllis froze like a deer in the headlights, her heart hammering against her ribs. She helplessly repeated her confused question as his shadow completely enveloped her small frame. Backed entirely into a corner, she found herself completely trapped against the wall by the incredibly handsome royal. The suffocating tension in the quiet room skyrocketed as he silently stared down into her panicked eyes. Suddenly breaking the intense romantic tension, Lucian dramatically threw his hands over his face and aggressively backed away in total defeat. Whining about his failure, he admitted he completely lacked her natural talent for intimidating people. Rubbing the back of his neck with an awkward, flustered laugh, he confessed that he had clumsily attempted to mimic her villainous intimidation tactics. Still recovering from her near heart attack, Amaryllis offered a weak, utterly bewildered response to his bizarre explanation. Regaining her professional composure, Amaryllis gently promised to thoroughly instruct him in the wicked arts of manipulation. She confidently assured him that his villainous education was in the safest, most capable hands. Despite her confident exterior, Amaryllis mentally screamed at herself to calm her violently racing heart. She desperately reminded her flustered brain that the smiling prince was simply being an eager, dedicated student of the dark arts. Thrilled by her promise, Lucian excitedly declared he would immediately arrange for her to accompany him during all official government affairs. Rising to the challenge, Amaryllis boldly requested to test the prince's raw political abilities first thing in the morning. Waving a cheerful goodbye, Lucian promised to personally escort her from her room the following day. Left alone to enjoy the absurdly luxurious meals and exquisite surroundings, Amaryllis marveled at how drastically her miserable life had transformed in a single, chaotic day. Listening intently to the administrative official, Amaryllis absorbed the details of her new educator's salary and duties. She internally rejoiced, realizing this arrangement offered incredibly favorable conditions for her future. Settling into her lavish new room, she meticulously planned her next steps towards securing a comfortable future. She resolved to find a solid safety net for the loyal servants before the inevitable fall of the Clebery family. To her relief, completing her royal duties guaranteed an introduction to a desired workplace or marriage partner. Drifting to sleep in her massive bed, she accepted that her grand escape plan was a dangerous race against time. Fortunately, the undeniable excellence of Prince Lucian gave her hope that everything would somehow work out. Morning sunlight spilled into the grand palace as another busy day officially commenced. Beneath the glittering crystal of an opulent chandelier, a familiar voice politely called out for the prince. The quiet atmosphere of the royal halls shattered as the call for Prince Lucian echoed again. The urgent summons signaled the immediate start of his official government duties. Taking her place beside him, Amaryllis observed quietly as the morning immediately kicked off with tedious lordly meetings. A visiting noble bowed respectfully, presenting an urgent application directly from his personal territory. Sweating nervously, the visiting count explained that severe storms had utterly destroyed a vital bridge in his lands. He pleaded desperately with the royal, emphasizing that the extensive damage required immediate restoration to prevent disaster. Clasping his hands in a desperate plea, the anxious nobleman officially requested additional royal subsidies. The heavy silence in the room amplified the gravity of his financial demands. Narrowing her eyes from the sidelines, Amaryllis silently scrutinized the trembling man before them. She quickly identified him as Count Bridget, the third noble to present such a pitiful case that morning. Smiling with practiced royal grace, Lucian cheerfully promised to pass the request along for immediate restoration. As the count bowed in profound gratitude, Amaryllis coldly noted the blatant lies dripping from the nobleman's words. Analyzing the situation with razor-sharp logic, she recalled that the Bridget territory owned vastly prosperous wheat fields. She deduced that while a broken bridge hindered exports, their booming economy absolutely did not require squeezing emergency subsidies from the crown. Concluding his deceptive performance, the relieved count formally excused himself from the royal presence. He backed out of the lavish office, leaving the prince and his new educator alone once more. Replaying the meeting in her mind, Amaryllis dissected the nobleman's nervous micro-expressions. She recalled how he deliberately hid his palms and repeatedly touched his cravat while delivering his sob story. Deepening her analysis, she remembered his subtle reaction right after the prince approved the request. He had noticeably rolled his tongue inside his mouth in a classic display of concealed relief. Connecting the behavioral dots, Amaryllis confirmed her grim suspicions. She knew perfectly well that every single one of those nervous tics were classic physical signs of a man desperately hiding the truth. Frowning deeply, she realized the previous visitors had acted identically, barely concealing their disgust toward her presence. Knowing the prince's reputation would plummet if he kept getting scammed, she decided to intervene immediately. Leaning in close to the seated prince, Amaryllis boldly suggested they start her villainous lessons a bit early. She quietly asked if his royal schedule could accommodate an immediate, practical demonstration of her skills. Beaming at her initiative, Lucian happily agreed, noting that his afternoon schedule was completely clear. Without missing a beat, Amaryllis sharply questioned if he had noticed the glaring lies and hidden secrets of his recent visitors. Jolting entirely out of his relaxed posture, Lucian let out a sharp gasp of pure shock. He stared at her with wide eyes, completely oblivious to the deception that had just unfolded. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, the naive prince recalled the tragic stories of bandit raids and natural disasters. He innocently justified his approvals by explaining that the kingdom's surplus tax funds easily covered these supposedly difficult cases. Staring at him with utter disbelief, Amaryllis praised his terrifyingly fast mental math regarding the national budget. However, she firmly scolded him, explaining that academic brilliance meant absolutely nothing when dealing with manipulative scammers. Unbothered by her harsh critique, Lucian flashed a dazzling, trusting smile and stated he was relying entirely on her expertise. She realized with a sigh that his incredible intellect was completely overshadowed by his dangerously pure, trusting nature. Taking a brief moment to regroup, the two shared a quiet pause over elegantly poured cups of tea. The clinking of porcelain briefly filled the room before the prince broke the silence. Pointing a finger at his own chest, Lucian playfully demanded she drop all royal honorifics before the lesson officially began. Flustered by his casual request, Amaryllis desperately argued against treating the nation's prince like a commoner. Cutting off her protests, the prince leveled a heavy, unblinking stare directly into her eyes. The sudden, suffocating pressure forced Amaryllis to physically flinch under his terrifyingly silent demand. Sweating profusely under his intense gaze, she weakly attempted to mount a final argument. Her voice trembled as she tried to uphold the rigid boundaries of their respective social stations. Surrendering to his sheer stubbornness, Amaryllis hastily offered a desperate compromise. She nervously asked if attaching the slightly lower title of Lord to his name would satisfy his strange demands. Instantly dropping his intimidating aura, Lucian beamed like an excited puppy at her proposed compromise. Radiating pure joy, he happily accepted the new title without a single complaint. Mentally chanting to keep herself calm, Amaryllis swiftly shifted into her professional educator persona. Knowing he strictly adhered to outward appearances, she firmly instructed him to wear only monotone or cool-colored outfits moving forward. Visualizing his new imposing aesthetic, she explained the psychological warfare behind wearing dark, refined garments. She emphasized that cool colors not only heightened his own focus but silently terrified opponents into abandoning their petty lies. Staring intently into her teacup, she plotted her first practical lesson in political ruthlessness. When Lucian worriedly asked if something was wrong, she firmly replied that they needed to immediately test his baseline insight. Raising a single finger, she issued her very first authoritative command as his dark arts instructor. She strictly ordered him to listen to her upcoming story and honestly report exactly how it made him feel. Lunging forward without warning, Amaryllis slammed her hand against the sofa, aggressively cornering the flustered royal. Staring deeply into his panicked eyes, she smoothly whispered that she had been desperately waiting for him to rescue her. Dropping her gaze, she flawlessly fabricated a heartbreaking tale of relentless domestic abuse. She spun a tragic story about being beaten by her brothers and treated like a lowly servant in the Clebury estate. Leaning even closer, she layered her performance with raw, trembling sorrow. She whispered about losing her beloved adopted brother 10 years ago, perfectly playing the role of a shattered, lonely maiden. Completely ensnared by her flawless acting, Lucian stared down at her with wide, horrified eyes. His voice cracked with genuine sorrow as he breathlessly whispered her name. Clenching his fists in blinding rage, the prince aggressively crushed the fabric of his trousers. He visibly trembled, furious at himself for letting her endure such unimaginable torment for so long. Lunging forward to passionately swear his protection, the fierce prince was instantly shut down by her raised hand. Instantly dropping her tragic facade, Amaryllis flatly announced that the acting exercise was officially over. Deflating like a popped balloon, the bewildered prince stammered in total confusion. Returning to her proper posture, Amaryllis calmly challenged him to decipher which parts of her tragic backstory were actually fabricated. Burying his violently blushing face in his hands, Lucian groaned in utter defeat. He sheepishly confessed that her sudden proximity had completely short-circuited his brain, leaving him unable to analyze anything. Staring blankly at the highly educated royal, a wave of profound concern washed over the new teacher. She realized with terrifying clarity that the future ruler of the kingdom was dangerously pure-hearted. Deciding to soften her harsh approach, she offered him a gentle, reassuring smile. Dropping the formalities entirely, she softly called out his first name to regain his scattered attention. Breaking down her own acting, she gently reminded him of her fiercely independent behavior since they first met. She confidently stated that anyone paying attention would know she was far from a timid, helpless maiden. Recovering his composure, Lucian listened intently as she dismantled her own lies with cold facts. She pointed out that his own thorough investigation proved she had a secret network of supportive allies within the abusive household. Flashing a playful wink, she flawlessly guided him toward the logical conclusion of her lesson. Slowly putting the pieces together, the prince smiled as he finally recognized the glaring plot holes in her tragic story. Breaking eye contact, she awkwardly addressed the romantic tension she had weaponized just moments ago. She firmly clarified that while her presence here was a miracle, it had absolutely nothing to do with genuine romantic love. Observing his suddenly quiet demeanor, Amaryllis worriedly wondered if her aggressive teaching methods had broken his royal spirit. Unbeknownst to her, the prince was staring at her with a heavy, dangerously intense gaze. Shattering the silence, Lucian softly agreed that he needed to cultivate a healthy amount of suspicion. A dark, possessive aura subtly leaked from the smiling prince as he noted how glad he was that her tragic story was entirely fake. Reaching forward, he firmly captured both of her hands in his own with unwavering conviction. Beaming with genuine affection, he swore to be her ultimate protector and begged her to rely entirely on his absolute power. Completely failing to get her ruthless point across, Amaryllis felt her soul temporarily leave her exhausted body. Defeated by his impenetrable purity, she offered a hollow, shadowed thank you to the beaming royal. Staring into the daunting future, she realized turning this golden retriever of a prince into a ruthless monarch would be an impossible task. She sent a silent, desperate prayer to her distant brother, knowing this dark education would take an agonizingly long time. Preparing for the treacherous road ahead, Amaryllis tapped her pen thoughtfully against her lip. She fully embraced her new role, determined to prove that the most beautiful flowers in the palace hid the deadliest poison. Riding together in a sunlit carriage, the young prince notes that this marks their first shared tea party. Amaryllis agrees with a simple nod, her demeanor calm and collected. Dressed impeccably in a white suit, Lucian offers a warm, radiant smile. He gazes ahead with bright anticipation as they head toward Duke Bachman's grand affair. Staring forward with a sharp, serious expression, Amaryllis treats the upcoming garden party as a strategic battlefield. She mentally prepares to utilize the gathering as a practical lesson. Two maids carefully adjust Amaryllis's elegant gown as she outlines her dual objectives. Her first goal is to systematically dismantle the infamous villainous reputation that clings to her name. Holding a small wrapped gift, Lucian cheerfully listens to his mentor's ruthless curriculum. The second objective is to teach His Highness how to decode the venomous, backhanded phrasing unique to highborn nobles. Adjusting the delicate flower at her collar, Amaryllis explains the harsh reality of aristocratic survival. She warns him that recognizing sarcasm is the first step to piercing through their gilded lies. Unfazed by the daunting task, Lucian grins brightly and acknowledges the value of her lesson. He recognizes that mastering this subtle verbal warfare will ultimately aid him in complex government affairs. The ornate carriage rolls to a smooth halt outside the bustling party venue. Amaryllis promises to act as his shield against the coming social storm until he gets used to the battlefield. A delicate shoe steps out onto the pavement, officially marking their arrival. The air instantly thickens with the unspoken tension of high society. Offering his hand like a true gentleman, Lucian flashes a confident, challenging smile. He playfully asks his stoic teacher if it is time to get serious. Walking gracefully through the grand iron gates, Amaryllis plans her psychological counterattack. She knows that by simply behaving like a virtuous lady, The sheer contrast will easily rewrite her villainous public image. She likens the strategy to a fierce, crying ruffian gently protecting a fragile kitten. The absurd contrast alone is enough to utterly manipulate the public's perception. A strong hand firmly grasps the carriage frame as a figure steps boldly into the aristocratic fray. The atmosphere instantly shifts as the young lion of Fredelt makes his commanding presence known. Standing side by side in perfect harmony, the pair elegantly greets the imposing hostess. Lucian formally expresses his gratitude for the invitation, projecting absolute regal authority. Memories flash of Duchess Batchman's son publicly breaking off his engagement at a similar venue. To the stern Duchess, Amaryllis is nothing more than the rude woman who thoroughly humiliated her family. Ignoring the underlying tension, Lucian proudly introduces Amaryllis as his chosen fiancé candidate and official partner. The declaration hangs heavy in the air, forcing the hostess to acknowledge her. A sharp twitch betrays the Duchess's ironclad composure. Her stern face hardens as she glares at the unwelcome guest out of the corner of her eye. Catching the micro-expression instantly, Amaryllis notes the fleeting disgust that crossed the older woman's face. The reaction is exactly what the cunning strategist expected. Maintaining a frosty facade, Duchess Bachmann greets her estranged acquaintance with chilling formality. The heavy silence between them speaks volumes of their fractured history. Amaryllis internally acknowledges that her past erratic behavior must have felt like a grievous betrayal to the strict, upstanding noblewoman. She understands exactly why the Duchess harbors such deep resentment. Seizing the narrative, Amaryllis curtsies with flawless, sweeping grace and offers a warm greeting. She tactically displays nothing but pure goodwill to disarm her host's hostility. Thrown off by the perfect display of etiquette, the Duchess awkwardly offers to guide them to their seats. Amaryllis quietly decides to maintain her flawless act and gauge the woman's shifting reactions. Sunlight glints off the grand architecture of the sprawling noble estate. The opulent setting completely masks the vicious social warfare brewing within its walls. Whispers erupt from the surrounding crowd as the couple navigates the garden. Onlookers expertly weave fawning praise for the prince with venomous glares directed entirely at his companion. Two gossiping nobles openly question why the beloved prince would ever choose such a notorious villainess. They eagerly exchange rumors, completely oblivious to the trap being set around them. Amaryllis's sharp eye narrows as she perfectly tracks the hostile murmurs rippling through the crowd. She listens closely as they speculate on how she managed to deceive the royal family. Stepping in front of her, Lucian fiercely shuts down the whispers with a surprisingly cold authority. He commands the gossiping nobles to stop speaking so selfishly without knowing her true nature. Wide-eyed and genuinely startled, Amaryllis looks up at her royal partner. She never expected him to return the crowd's hostility with such a freezing, protective reprimand. The chattering nobles freeze in terror, realizing they have made a grave tactical error. Insulting the crown prince's chosen partner is entirely synonymous with questioning his own divine judgment. Seizing the golden opportunity, Amaryllis puts on a heartbreaking performance of sorrow. She spins a tragic tale, claiming she only acted wickedly because her cousin and former fiancé were secretly in love. The surrounding nobles gasp, utterly scandalized by the revelation of the secret affair. They whisper that she bravely pretended to be a villainess just to graciously withdraw from the arrangement. A simple confirmation echoes through the stunned crowd, solidifying the lie into absolute fact. The fabricated tragedy quickly begins to take root in their minds. Playing along flawlessly, Lucian smiles and firmly confirms that his thorough royal investigation uncovered the exact same truth. He claims her selfless dedication deeply moved him to choose her as his fiancée. Narrowing his eyes with sharp, predatory intent, the prince glares down the trembling nobles. He silently dares them to call his thoroughly investigated royal decree frivolous. Hidden from the crowd's view, Amaryllis gives Lucian a subtle, virtual thumbs up for his impeccable covering fire. The spectators fully buy into the dramatic narrative, murmuring their absolute shock. Overcome with realization, Duchess Bachmann covers her mouth as her entire worldview fractures. She quietly murmurs to herself, wondering if this tragic, selfless sacrifice is truly the reality of the situation. Locking eyes with the trembling noblewoman, Amaryllis registers the bait being swallowed. The calculated reaction signals that it is time to reel in her biggest target. Strong regret and intense self-directed anger wash over the Duchess's distressed face. She hates herself for failing to believe in the sweet, innocent girl she once deeply doted on. The heavy weight of misunderstanding crushes the older woman's spirit. She is consumed by the sheer frustration of failing to see the tragic reality behind the villainous mask. A dark, manipulative thrill runs through Amaryllis as she watches the Duchess crumble. She knows that by fanning the flames of this profound guilt, she will forge an absolutely unbreakable ally. Reaching forward, the strategist gently clasps the older woman's trembling hands. The physical contact brilliantly seals the emotional manipulation. Smiling with angelic sorrow, Amaryllis warmly apologizes for the pain her deception caused. She expresses profound relief that she can finally share the truth with someone she respects. With tearful, pleading eyes, she sells the final piece of the heartbreaking illusion. She begs the Duchess to accept her actions, claiming she willingly embraced the world's hatred just to see her loved ones happy. Her sharp gaze zeroes in on the breaking noblewoman, calculating the precise emotional payload. The trap only needs a tiny fraction of a push to permanently snap shut. Amaryllis leans in close, wrapping the emotionally devastated Duchess in a tender embrace. The silent grip of her hand secures her newfound, powerful pawn. A chorus of shadowed nobles suddenly crowds around her, showering her with sympathetic praise. The strategic victory is absolute as the high society labels her a brave, tragic heroine. Standing beside his triumphant teacher, Lucian watches the fawning ladies completely alter their tune. However, he astutely notes that the underlying culture of backbiting remains unchanged. A bright, genuine smile graces the prince's face as he realizes the sheer brilliance of the maneuver. As her reputation rebrands into a tragic heroine, his own status as a wise, perceptive leader skyrockets. The sprawling noble mansion stands as a silent witness to the complete shift in power. Amaryllis notes that her deceitful uncle and her treacherous ex-fiancé will soon be ruined by the very rumors they sparked. Half hidden in the shadows, a sinister, triumphant smirk twists across Amaryllis's face. The board is perfectly set, and the calculated destruction of her enemies is proceeding flawlessly. Gazing at the majestic architecture, Amaryllis marvels at the prince's terrifyingly fast learning curve. She realizes that his ability to absorb practical manipulation will drastically shorten his educational period. Striking a confident, authoritative pose, she prepares to escalate his training to the next level. She promises Lord Lucian that from now on, their ruthless lessons will be strictly man-to-man. Sitting opposite the young prince in a lavish room, Amaryllis declares she will now use noble-specific phrasing on him. She challenges Lord Lucian to answer her prompts while recalling the exact counter-arguments they discussed yesterday. Flushing with a confident smile, Lucian eagerly accepts the strategic challenge. He assures his strict teacher that he remembers yesterday's lessons vividly and is completely ready to give it a try.